Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, so we left Charles the First, son of James, cousin of Queen Elizabeth, and their reigns over England, right? So as we know, everybody loved Elizabeth, the Iron Queen, the Virgin Queen, Virginia. She's awesome. Dies in 1603, though, right? Then Mary Queen of Scots is supposed to ascend the throne, but she's dead. All right, so because of a hilarious story that we talked about in class. And then we know that James I takes the throne. James I thinks he's an absolutist. He hates Parliament. He hates Puritans. He hates a lot of people. He wants to rule from his house, and he would rather moon people than he would actually let them see him rule his kingdom, right? So then eventually when he dies, after a lot of crazy stuff, like somebody almost blows him up, and he translates the Bible into English, and he colonizes some places, and pretty much effectively begins the process of the United States of America becoming a thing. He dies. His son Charles takes over. Charles I, not a lot like his dad in the sense of they believe in the same thing. They believe they're both divine right leaders. However, he thinks his dad was way too frivolous, had too many parties, and cared too much about dumb stuff. And so he starts trying to get into wars, dissolves Parliament, does it 3 times in 2 years, hires him, fires him, hires him, fires him, hires him, fires him, right? So does that whole deal. Then goes into his 11 years of tyranny. This makes the people hate him. A rebellion breaks out in Scotland. Long Parliament comes back to try and be petty. Parliament kills his best friend, or tries to anyway, and then that's where we left off in class. And with the tears streaming down Charles's face, he signs the death warrant of one of his closest friends, right? So, and I can never remember what his name is. It's some basic Betty name, but whatever. So he signs the death warrant of one of his closest friends because Parliament made the implication that something may happen to his wife and children should he not sign this document. Sorry, I was looking at my plant. I had to make sure it didn't need water or anything. So anyway, well, along those lines, following this, he signs that document in fear of his family's safety. Then his wife, Henrietta, the Catholic from France, says, wait a minute, Charles, you're the king of this country. You have divine right authority. You are in charge. You go down there and you do the same thing to them. You arrest and execute some of them, right, just to show them who's boss. So he goes all the way down to Parliament, and in a moment of hesitation, he, instead of breaking the door down, he knocks on the door and says, open the doors in the name of the king. And then the people in Parliament go, no. And they kept the door shut. And that gave those 5 members of Parliament, one of them including this guy named John Pym, enough time to escape out of a back door, which I find absolutely hilarious, imagining 5 little old men in black robes going, tee, and then just running away out a back door, right? In this moment, Charles then decides that he's going to raise an army because of this injustice that was done to him and to avenge the death of his friend. So he runs away to raise an army, right? The Parliament is going to raise an army too. That leads to the Civil War in England, right? The English Civil War, which is going to be waged from 1642 to 1651. Now, some of you are like, man, that's a long Civil War. Well, it actually happened in 2 phases. The first phase was Charles, and then the next phase was Charles's son, Charles Jr. is what we're going to call him, versus the guy who ends up winning the very first Civil War. But we're not going to get that confusing about it. But what you need to know, in this grand scheme of things, all this comes from the fact that these Stuart monarchs believed that they were absolute leaders. They thought they were absolute figures, right? And their constant attempt to be absolutist in a land where the constitutional monarchy reigns is constantly going to get rebuffed. And what I mean by rebuffed, that means that they're actually going to lose the attempt every time to the Parliament, right? That's why this is so important, is understanding that absolutism was a trend going on in Spain, France, Russia, the Holy Roman Empire, Prussia at one point, a place called, the first version of Germany, the Hohenzollern family. It's a big deal during the 1600s, right? Very, very big deal during the 17th century to have an absolute leader, going into the 1700s, the 18th century. So a civil war breaks out because of that attempt, right? So going into it even further, now we've got 2 sides. And as we know, America had a civil war, and our civil war was super intense, and we had the Confederacy versus the Union, right? And then, did we have nicknames for each other? Of course we did. The Northerners called us rebels. And yes, I said us, being from the South. The Northerners called us rebels. The Southerners called them Yankees, right? And that is some nicknames that have stuck. And there were two nicknames that actually stuck with these guys as well. It was the Cavaliers, or the Charles supporters, versus the Parliamentarians, or the Roundheads is what they were called. Now, they were called this for a reason, and jot this down really quick somewhere nearby. The Cavaliers were called this because they were considered by the Parliamentarians to be foreign invaders, right? They named them after these people called Caballeros, which is a Spanish soldier on a horse, right? On a mounted horseback. Now, you could recognize a Cavalier supporter, or a Charles supporter, a Cavalier, by a lot of different things, but mainly how wealthy they were, their very well-groomed mustache, their long, luxurious hair, because, again, that took money to take care of, an ostrich plume coming out of their hat, because ostrich feathers were wildly expensive. But this is a Cavalier, right? Now, this has lingered on in the States of America. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the UVA Cavaliers. It's a symbol, right? Now, unfortunately, we don't have, like, the Louisiana Roundheads, right? Because the Roundheads is not a very appetizing name for a group. But the Cavaliers called the Parliament supporters Roundheads as an insult because of, we don't really know, but it's possibly two reasons. One of the reasons may have been, like, their helmet, right? Or it may have been the fact that their squires, assistants, and a bunch of them had shaved heads to prevent lice because they were poor. So we all know which side Mr. Terry would be fighting for. But anyway, that is the two sides fighting against each other, right? Now, the guy leading the Roundheads, because we obviously know that who's leading the Cavaliers, but Charles, right? Who's leading the Roundheads then? It's a dude by the name of Oliver Cromwell, right? Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell, little asterisk real quick, as you can tell, is a devout Puritan, right? The guys that James and Charles hated so much. Remember, there's like a three-way fight going on. Catholic versus Anglican versus Puritan. And all three of them don't like the other two, right? So the biggest thing about Oliver Cromwell, though, is he's a devout Puritan. As you can see with his white collar, his very, very basic armor, his no need for glam or glitz or ostrich plumes or superfine mustaches and like very long, luxurious hair. He's just a Puritan man trying not to distract from God because he's a Calvinist, right? So anyway, going forward, though, we're going to go ahead and skip over a bunch of stuff. I could talk for days about the Battle of Edge Hill and the Battle of Naseby and like all these other things. But just so you know, spoiler alert, the Roundheads are going to be victorious. Now, a lot of historians claim this is because of the Roundhead brutality. A lot of historians claim this is because of the ability that the Roundheads had more support in England from the common people. And a lot of other historians will tell you that the reason why the Roundheads won is due to the strategy implemented by Oliver Cromwell, right? So, but the biggest thing is right now you're sitting at a problem, right? You've got two sides. You got the Cavaliers and you got the Roundheads, and the Roundheads is led by Cromwell, and the Cavaliers are led by Charles, right? The King of England. And he just lost a battle in his own country. So what's going to happen is Cromwell and the Parliament is going to be like, all right, Charles, you need to apologize for all the things you've done. You need to step back as king. Not step down, but you need to calm down. Sign a bunch of documents limiting a lot of your power. Your choice, all right? Charles refused. And so what ends up happening, he refuses the Parliament, and so they try him, put him on trial, and he finds out one day while he's playing a game of chess that he's going to be executed by his own people. And he took it like a man. He really, really did. He took it like a person. He wore 2 shirts when he went out there because it was really cold that morning and he didn't want to shiver and look weak. This is Charles actually right here. This is another little picture of right here. You can see that's the executioner. He wore 2 shirts. He took an orange stuffed with cloves and shoved it in his pocket because it smells really strong and he didn't want to faint, right? And he also willingly put his head down on the block and did not have to be pushed down. He just said, and he yelled at them to swing. He said, swing the axe already. And like they wham, and they just like cut his noggin off, right? So, and Charles the First has now been executed. So what do we have? Dun, 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 very, very nice, Heather. Good job. A power vacuum, right? We have the absence of a leader, okay? So now who's going to step into that vacuum but the Puritan leader himself, Oliver Cromwell. So go ahead and write this as a title. So following the end of there was a time where England had no king, where they were a republic ruled by a Puritan man, which is very, very aggressive, right? This is not good because remember, what do Puritans dislike? Oh, I don't know, everything. All right, so they don't like anything. They don't like celebrating anything. They don't like doing anything. They don't like distracting from God. They don't like doing anything at all, right? So the biggest thing is this is going to drastically affect the way that England functions, right? So how does Oliver Cromwell get his goals accomplished? Because he creates a thing that only supports him, right? This thing called the Rump Parliament. Put a asterisk next to that, or underline it, or circle it, or make it look like it's exploding, or something like that. Very, very important term. It's because when Oliver Cromwell came into the Parliament, he fired anyone that could possibly support Charles, right? If you did not support him, you could not be in his Parliament, right? So he called it his Rump Parliament, okay? So in the Rump Parliament was able to pass a lot of crazy things that went down in England, right? Events under Cromwell, including the fact that they invaded Ireland, killing a lot of Catholic priests and a lot of Catholic civilians simply because they are Catholic, right? They led another war against Charles Jr., right? Remember I said that earlier? Charles I had two sons, Charles and James, right? So Charles Jr. gets claimed to be the king of the Scots by the Scottish people because the Scots are like, we don't know about this whole not having a king thing. This is a little weird. And then also not to mention the fact because the Stuarts are still technically the kings of Scotland as well, right? So Charles Jr. tries to lead a war against Cromwell and loses, right? Cromwell tried to cancel Christmas because Christmas in England kind of became much more about drinking and festivities and a lot less about Mass. So he had to try to have that canceled and just have only Masses all day long on Christmas that you had to go to. He pushed these things called the Navigation Acts, forcing the American colonies to only trade with England and not use any other companies, especially the Dutch, because he didn't like the Dutch. And this is going to help lead to the American Revolution. It's going to be considered one of the very, very first things that happens during the American Revolution that makes the American colonies angry, right? He closes bars. He closes theaters. He fines people for missing Mass. He banned sports. He outlawed makeup. He outlawed jewelry that was excessive. He outlawed excessive dress. Was this a bad idea? Like looking back on it, was it a bad idea to let Oliver Cromwell take over all of England? Yeah, probably it was. All right, so... And what ends up happening is he had one positive thing. He allowed the Jews to come back to England, right? He gave them safe haven, okay? So the Jews end up returning to England. Yay, Jews. Good for you guys, right? They finally catch a break, right? Especially after the Reconquista of Spain and then also persecution in a lot of other areas. But the Jews are going to be given safe haven in England, right? So, however, he turned England eventually into a bunch of military districts, right? And he used the military almost like it was a police force because he didn't even refer to himself as a king of England. He called himself the Lord Protector of England, right? Which to me sounds an awful lot like a king, but just a mean version of one, all right? So I know one of y'all is like, yeah, that does sound kind of mean. I agree, Eliana. It does sound kind of mean, doesn't it? All right, now, really, really quick, though, Oliver Cromwell also, if you look at this thing, this right here, that's the royal stamp seal of Charles I. He's sitting, it's a man sitting on a horse that is at full gallop with a hunting dog next to him, right? Trying to show his prominence and his awesomeness and his wealth and everything else. This is the royal stamp seal, or not the royal, but the Lord Protectorate seal of Oliver Cromwell. It's almost the exact same. Like, literally, it's almost the exact same, except his horse isn't at full gallop and there's no dog. All right, so, like, it's very, very intense to see the fact that this dude basically was the king of England, and he led a crazy little conservative social revolution that everyone hated. So do you think everyone's going to look at this and be like, maybe we messed up? Probably, right? So Oliver Cromwell, a very intense figure, paint me warts and all, eventually dies, and his son, Richard, tries to take over, but it fails. And so Parliament decides to bring the Stuarts back in this period known as the Restoration, right? So go ahead and jot this down. Put a star next to the Restoration. This is a very important title so you can understand. These two guys will not be in the matching sections of your test. They'll actually be in a multiple choice question, and the multiple choice question will sound something like, which of the following did not happen under the Restoration period of England, right? So here's the thing. Oliver Cromwell's little social revolution was so bad because everybody likes celebrating and having a good time on Christmas, you know what I mean? Like, it was so bad that they decided to bring the kings back that they just had executed, right? So the first person to take the throne is none other than the son of Charles I, and they claim him Charles II, right? Now, here's the thing, though. He's going to start out trying to be very positive. He's going to reopen a bunch of bars and establishments that were closed by Cromwell. He reopens theaters. He reopens, he reopens shops that can sell jewelry and makeup and things like that. He's a big fan of tennis and other women. Now, we believe that he had more kids with his mistresses than he ever did with his actual wife. His wife was from Portugal. It was a big problem. She was disgusted by him, so she didn't even really live there. So he's a very kind of confusing figure in and of himself. And the two biggest things that happened under his rule was the plague came back again in London in 1665. And then in 1666, the Great Fire of London happens. It breaks out, which we believe might have actually been the thing that possibly led to the end of the plague in London, right? Like this big fire that happened in London might have been the reason why the Great Plague actually finally stopped. Because remember when we talked about the plague in the Middle Ages and how there was a pope that sat between two fires and apparently the bacteria can't survive inside those fires? So ironically enough, a fire that destroyed over 50% of the entire city of London may have actually destroyed a disease. So it's like a double-edged sword kind of a thing. And then also, ironically enough, guess where the fire started in London? Pudding Lane in a bake shop. All right, so now he also is going to work with Parliament, and he's secretly very Catholic. He also does this crazy thing as well, where he has Oliver Cromwell's body dug up, and they stick Oliver Cromwell's head on a stick and run through England with it. It's actually really funny. Gomez, Hernandez, Michelle, I know y'all know about it. It's on your poster that y'all made, right? So then after Charles dies, a hilarious death where his doctors actually end up killing him on accident, okay? His brother takes the throne. And if you want to know that story, ask me in class, right? Oh, how did Charles II die? All right, so Charles II died, never mind. All right, I don't have time. I don't want to make this too long, right? So James II ends up taking the throne. So here's the funny thing about it. James II and Charles II are both sons of Charles I, right? Their mother is Henrietta, a French Catholic. And when Charles was executed, they ran away to France. So France is devoutly Catholic, right? Devoutly Catholic. And since they're devoutly Catholic, these two young men actually ended up converting to Catholicism. But here's the thing. Charles II is secretly a Catholic. He took his first communion and his baptism on his deathbed, right? James II, on the other hand, is openly Catholic. And the scary part about it is because of the fact that he is a Stuart, he does get to take the throne regardless of this, right? And so the Anglican Parliament and the Puritan Parliament is we really don't want this guy in charge. This is a terrible idea, but maybe it'll be okay because we're just going to have another family show up anyway later on due to the fact that he has all James has got is a bunch of daughters, right? He's got 3 daughters and he has no sons. So we should be fine. And then he gave birth to a son that he named James as well, and the Parliament's oh, crap. And then this drives Parliament insane, right? So that he might actually be passing the throne to another Catholic, or that he might be being influenced by their French relatives because their cousins rule France, right? That's the Bourbon dynasty. Now, Parliament plots to drive him out. So what they do, they make a call, all right? Not an actual call because they don't have phones yet, all right? So they make a call. They make a call over to wherever, all places, to the Netherlands, right? And this crazy thing happens, known as the Glorious Revolution, right? And Parliament invites James's Protestant daughter, wife of William of Orange, the Dutch head of state, to come and run James out of town. And since she's a Stuart that's married, right, that means that this is allowed and that she's allowed to show up and make everybody angry, especially her dad, right? So what ends up happening, though, is William of Orange, the husband of Mary Stuart, married daughter of James II, shows up with a fleet and an army, and James is hey, English army, get him! And they're no. The English refuse to fight, and they refuse to fight, William of Orange, and they actually side with him, right? And in this scene right here, that's James II going to get on a boat to run away from his own daughter. And where he ends up going, he runs away to France, and he goes and he lives with his cousin, Louis XIV, the man that Louisiana is actually named after, right? So it's an absolutely insane thing that ends up going down. But, he runs away. And the crazy thing about it is a revolution, which is huge in our next unit, is a forcible overthrow of a government. It's a social order in favor of another, right? So, if we were to have a revolution here at Chappelle, all of us picked up sticks and we freaked out and we, overthrew the admins and we brought in other ones, right? That would be a revolution, right? We had an American revolution, right? We overthrew the British power and we put it in place of our own, right? So a revolution is a forcible overthrow, but the reason why this one was called glorious is because no one died. Not a drop of blood was shed. as William and Mary came to the throne, right? And in the Glorious Revolution, William and Mary end up taking the throne, and they become the very first monarchs to bloodlessly overthrow an entire monarchy system, right? And they became co-monarchs. They actually ruled with Parliament. They gave ruling authority to Parliament, and they integrated new documents inside the system of England. They created an English Bill of Rights that included freedom of speech and free elections, and they successfully created the best limited monarchy that England had ever seen. These two will be in your matching section, even though ironically enough, some of you are all like, well, they're a pair of people. I should be able to figure this out. You'll see. Now, anyway, but they created a limiting monarchy because you know what? Nothing stops the Magna Carta, all right? But that's it. Go ahead and get all this down. We will heavily review this stuff when you come into class next. I'll talk to you guys later. Y'all have a good one.